I'm Greg, and you're here at Desolate Motorsports. We specialize in your 80 to 96 Ford Bronco. We manufacture all types of suspension and accessory components for them. Today, we got you guys here. We're going to be installing this new Camberg full floating differential into this Bronco. We took the old rear end out, which is this 8.8 factory rear end. This one has some goodies on it, but for the kind of abuse that this thing's going to be capable of, it wasn't going to be quite good enough. So we upgraded to the Camberg housing. It's got big 35 spine axles, the full floating hub. It's a 9-inch style, but it's fully fabricated. And then we get it from Camberg and we accessorize it with all the spring mounts, brake lines, mount the brake rotors and calipers and everything, and fully assemble the thing. We've coated it in Steelite paint, which is a special coating. It's stronger than powder coat, so it holds up really good to the abuse that these things get. So yeah, we'll start installing it and show you guys along the way. This is Brian Ware from One Day Wraps Ford Bronco here. This truck features some of our suspension components. It's got our modified TTB beams. We just installed upgraded steering for Brian, which is going to be our heavy duty drag link kit, PSC steering box along with a PSC pump, and our Saginaw conversion bracket. The truck features a King shock and King air bump. It's got a big old nasty Ford motor in it, so this thing's got some real horsepower. It's gonna put some abuse to that new rear end. So this is a Camberg Racing full float 9-inch style rear end that we're installing into Brian's Bronco. This particular housing is based off of a Ford 9-inch design, so it uses a Ford 9-inch third member, but there's actually no Ford 9-inch parts in it. It's all aftermarket, all bigger, beefier, heavier duty stuff. 3.5-inch axle tubes that are 1/4-inch wall. It has a 35 spine axle shaft. It's a Yukon gear set with 410 gears, Detroit True Track, and a 1350 yoke, big pinion bearing support. It's got Willwood 4-piston calipers with 12-inch rotors. This is a full floating design, so there's no flanged axle. The hub is completely independently supported with its own bearings, so the axle is only there to drive the vehicle, relieves the axle of all of its duties of holding the weight of the car up. These hubs come standard with a 5/8 wheel stud, so we did a 5/8 wheel stud upgrade in the front so that it has matching 5/8 wheel studs front and back. This hub is also hub centric, meaning that the hub itself is 4 1/4 in diameter, and that's exactly the center bore of the wheel. So the wheel sits on the hub and all the weight is alleviated on the hub itself rather than on the wheel studs. Again, just one more thing to make everything a little bit stronger and a little bit better. We've already completely accessorized this rear end with the spring perches, the bump stop pads, the hard lines for all the brakes, all in the proper locations to be a direct bolt in for this Bronco. And we can do that for anybody's Bronco. We have all the specs for all of our leaf spring kits and sometimes even 4-link kits depending on your exact application. But we commonly set these rear ends up. We buy the different parts from the different manufacturers, and we can basically build you a rear end turnkey, install it in the car, bleed the brakes, add gear oil, and you're on the road. So we try to make it as easy as possible based off the knowledge, the fixtures, and the things that we've gathered over the years of doing these rear ends for trucks like these. So Brian's Bronco is outfitted with a few of our components in the back. This is our race-inspired sway bar kit that works specifically for our leaf spring suspension setups. The sway bar ties the two sides of the car together to keep a top-heavy vehicle from not wanting to roll over so bad. So this, combined with a taller mount for these King shocks, aftermarket leaf springs, and then this big rear end provides close to 17 inches of wheel travel. Still keeps everything underneath the floorboard, so there's no shocks protruding up through the inside. You're allowed to run you're able to run a big race-inspired shock. Pretty tough setup for basically all being a bolt-on rear suspension conversion. So we got the rear end actually mounted to the vehicle with the U-bolts. We still have a few things to connect. We're going to put the drive shaft in. We're going to hook up the brake line. We're going to hook up the vent hose. We need to take some measurements, and we're actually going to weld on a set of our aftermarket lower shock mounts directly onto the rear end. But we'll get those measurements, get that all mocked up, tack it, pull everything back apart, weld those pieces, and then touch them up with the Steel-It paint. So these are the small U-bolts that hold the drive shaft to the yoke on the new differential. These are a larger 1350 size that we've upgraded to. I always like to put a little dab of Loctite on them and then before installing them. You want to make sure not to over tighten these, because if you do, you'll crush down on the caps that actually hold the needle bearings in the U-joint and cause heat and premature wear. This is the VSS Relocation Kit that we offer. What this does is takes the sensor that used to be in the old differential and moves it up here to the drive shaft. Now this works on the Broncos perfectly because they have a 4-bolt output shaft. Some of the other Ford trucks had a slip yoke with this, does not work on. But for the Broncos, it's absolutely perfect. It mates up to the Ford Warner 1356 transfer case and is applicable on, I believe, 1990 or 1991 up until 96 Broncos. So if you're going to any aftermarket rear end in a Bronco, you're most likely going to need one of these. And they're available on our website or in our retail storefront. But really great little item. Picks up all the signals that the old differential used to say, goes right through the factory sensor and back up to the computer so it knows what's going on, it controls the transmission and all the ABS and everything. On these aftermarket rear ends, we like to run a big vent hose. One of the reasons this rear end holds a lot more oil, and we have an elevated pinion because of the short wheelbase. So you're susceptible to the rear end having to burp out pressure. So a factory vent line on a rear end would be about 5/16 of an inch. We upgrade to a 1/2 inch. So this is a Dash 8 vent hose. There's a bung here in the top of the housing. We have an AN fitting with a big hose. We're going to run this up to a high point so it can't suck water or anything if you went through a water crossing, and then this will allow the rear end to vent pressure as needed without hurting any of the seals in the pinion or the hub bearings. Reinstalling our sway bar back to the spring perches. So this sway bar kit comes complete with the new leaf spring U-bolt perches that are made for 3 or 3 1/4 or 3 1/2 inch axle tubes. So they will work if you've got a stock rear end or an aftermarket one, as long as it's not 4-inch diameter. And it's got some little misalignment spacers, some FK Heim joints. The links are all machined aluminum, and they're anodized with our logo and everything. So we've got the rear end basically installed into the car. The one thing that we couldn't do out of the car was set the lower shock mount. So now that we've got it in the car, we've gotten our measurements, we know where the shock mount needs to go. So we're going to tack it up, we're going to remove the shock, we'll weld the mount onto the housing, let it cool, paint it with the Steel-It, and then reinstall the shock. And after that, basically we're just going to bleed the brakes and install the wheels, and some gear oil in this rear end will be ready to rock. We just finished installing the cambered rear end into this 95 Bronco. We hooked up the drive line, we made the shock mounts and welded them to the housing, mounted the shocks, hooked up our sway bar kit, installed the U-bolts to hold the springs to the rear axle. We've bled the brakes, filled it with gear oil. We mounted the vent line and zip tied it up high so it'll stay out of the water. Literally all that's left is put the wheels on, set it on the ground, and do some break-in procedures with heat cycles on the diff, and we're good to go. So you just saw the install of a cambered rear end into a 1995 Ford Bronco. The procedure was very streamlined because of the extra work that we do ahead of time, and we can do that for you if you're a consumer looking to purchase an aftermarket, bigger, better rear end for your Bronco. We can set it up so that it'll make your life a lot easier. You literally can get a rear end on a pallet and have it installed within a day or two, even in a garage setting. So you don't need to be a professional fabricator. I'd like to thank you for coming and checking out the shop today. Thanks for watching. If you want any more information about the products that we offer, you can visit our website, desolatemotorsports.com, or you can check us out on Instagram at desolate_motorsports.